Hello everyone, to continue building my house, the first thing I need to do is install the floor slab. Initially I wanted a one-story house, but since I didn't have much money, the house turned out small, only 50 square meters. My financial situation is slowly starting to improve, and I realize that I can handle more space, but the foundation is already done, it's already 50 square meters. So I decided to add an attic floor to the house, and to be able to live comfortably with the attic, you need a good floor structure. In this video, I'll talk about the types of floor structures I considered, the nuances of these structures, how much each one costs, and which one I ultimately chose and why. I had some wishful thinking about using a frequently ribbed precast monolithic floor structure. This is when there's a reinforcement frame, the gaps between the frame are filled with aerated concrete blocks, then small diameter rebar is laid on top, and the whole thing is poured with concrete. It turns out to be an almost perfect option for flooring in terms of price and quality. There are ready-made solutions like Marca's flooring, but you can also do this yourself. I got really excited about this, but as they say, everything is known by comparison, so I had to compare the precast monolithic flooring with other options in terms of production, labor, and cost. One of the most common comments I get under my videos about flooring is, just use ready-made reinforced concrete slabs. I don't argue with the statement that it's faster, more reliable, and cheaper, but that's only in theory. Because some people really can buy good reinforced concrete slabs, either new or used, for a small amount of money. In my city, you simply can't buy reinforced concrete slabs. The nearest place where I can buy them is the city of St. Petersburg, and having them delivered from Peter to me would cost a fortune. That's one. 2. The crane that could install these slabs on my site would most likely get stuck, and there would be problems with the installation. 3. The ready-made reinforced concrete slabs have standard sizes and a lot of weight. That's why you should design the house for standard sizes and slab weight from the start. For monolithic construction, using a precast monolithic floor slab is easier, especially if you need to cover a span of more than 6 meters. Precast monolithic floor slabs are especially efficient for large spans. Even a 10-meter span can be covered with these slabs without any problems. As you might guess, precast monolithic floor slabs are not cheap. And for my house, the materials alone would cost about $150,000. The alternative is a wooden floor, either a standard one made from regular boards, but in that case, it's preferable for your span to be less than 4 meters. My span is 7 meters. Actually, it's not a big problem. At many sawmills, you can arrange to have lumber cut for you even up to 8 meters, but you do need to look for such a sawmill. There are possibilities, and you need to know how to negotiate. A wooden floor made of boards is the cheapest option, but it's also the least successful in use. I lived with a wooden floor. You know what it's like when someone walks above you on it, but honestly, I can't say it's completely unbearable. Yes, you can hear everything everywhere, everything creaks all the time. But you can live with it, and there are ways to improve it. In the old house on my property, the first floor's flooring is made of planks, and there were no calculations done. It was all done by eye. And in this room, even though the span is quite small, it's really tiny here, it still behaves this way. The standard glass test, I don't even need to jump hard for it to be obvious how it behaves. But if the flooring is done correctly, with all the calculations, then it behaves much better. To buy all the necessary boards for my flooring, it would have cost me about 50,000 rubles. And even for a span of 7 meters, regular boards would actually work. You would just need to make the spacing between the boards smaller and add cross pieces. According to the calculations, the flooring would handle the load, but it wouldn't meet the deflection requirements. But honestly, who cares? There would just be more deflection than allowed, and that's it. The key is it can handle the load. Creating a level ceiling is just technique. Regarding comfort with this flooring, yes, it will be uncomfortable. You have to pay for comfort. And wooden floors can be made not only from planks. There are, for example, wooden I-beams. These are 2 beams with either oriented strand board or plywood glued between them. Such beams perform better than just planks, but accordingly they are more expensive. I-beams also need to be calculated for loads. And with my 7-meter span and the spacing I need, the beams would end up being more than 30 centimeters high, while my aerated concrete block is 25 centimeters. And that's why installation would be very inconvenient, because I would have to make a cutout for each beam in every block. Another downside in my case is that I'm fighting for every centimeter of height in the attic, because the original design didn't include an attic, and to get a normal ceiling height, I'll either have to raise the walls or increase the roof pitch. And because the proportions would be lost, in that case the whole visual appearance of the house would fall apart. I want to keep the beautiful look of the exterior. And of course the usual story is that I can only buy such beams in St. Petersburg, and again, considering the delivery, it will turn out expensive. For some people, I-beams will be a good option, you just need to calculate it specifically for your situation and your conditions. You can span even 13 meters with wooden I-beams, it's just that the cross-section and height will be large. Another option for a wooden floor is to use glued laminated timber. Basically, these are the same boards, just glued together, but the boards are kiln-dried, planed, and calibrated. Regular boards have what are called wood defects, various cracks, knots, and because of them, the board doesn't always behave predictably. Glued laminated timber minimizes wood defects, has greater load-bearing capacity, and makes it possible to create beams with a large cross-section and, again, up to 13.5 meters in length. Of course, glued laminated timber is also much more expensive than regular boards. In our city last year, the purchase price was about $30,000. For once, the production of glued laminated timber turned out to be not far from my city, so delivery would have been cheap. I originally wanted to make the flooring specifically from glued laminated timber, and last fall I even placed an order at the factory. They told me they had a long queue and I would have to wait a month for my order. By that time, I was already pretty tired of construction, since I was building everything alone with my own hands. So I needed to take a break, and I thought I could go relax and visit my family. And by the time I get back, the beams would be ready, right? I asked them 10 times back then, are you sure you'll do it? Really sure? Do you understand that my construction will be on hold for a month because of you? We definitely agreed. They definitely don't need anything else from me. They told me everything will be top quality, don't worry, the beams will be ready in 4 weeks. 3 weeks passed, I come back from vacation, I call and ask, so how's my order? And they say, what order? I really lost it then. I even started yelling at the person. Anyone who knows me personally would be very surprised that I can actually yell at people. It was a momentary lapse of weakness. I just believe that when you yell at someone, it's unpleasant for both you and the other person, and it doesn't help solve the problem. It's just that, shortly before that, I had another issue with the concrete, so I was a bit on edge at the time. I'll talk about the concrete when pouring the reinforced belt during a constructive dialogue with the glued timber. It turned out that my order simply got lost with them because they have a large production facility. They have orders of 70 cubic meters, and they told me straight to my face that my 1.5 cubic meters didn't really interest anyone, and they just didn't care about an order worth 50,000. They admitted, like, yes, sorry, it's our fault, but that didn't make me feel any better, but I still need the beams, right? I asked if they'd make the beams for me, and they replied, what? They told me, yes, we'll do it, but you'll have to wait another month, after which I said goodbye to them, because it was already late autumn. I realized that all the deadlines had been missed, and I wouldn't have time to finish the roof. Here's a business idea for you in Leningrad: manufacturing glued laminated timber. They have so many orders that they don't care about their clients, and that's even with me knowing where they're located, living nearby, and personally coming to their production site. I couldn't find them online at all, not a single ad, not even on Avito. It's unclear where they get so many orders from. In the end, spring came, but the beams aren't going to buy themselves. So I kept searching, and while I was looking through St. Petersburg websites for glued laminated timber, I came across an ad with a comparable price for laminated veneer lumber beams. Laminated veneer lumber beam is, simply put, plywood of a large cross-section, from which you can make large beams. Laminated veneer lumber beams perform even a bit better in use than glued beams, and again they're a bit more expensive, about 42,000 rubles per cubic meter. I thought about it for a long time, weighed all the pros and cons, did all the calculations, and it turned out that this was the most rational option for my situation, so I bought laminated veneer lumber beams at those prices. Prices rose sharply over the winter, which is scary, and glued beams became more expensive too. And it's good that I bought all the aerated concrete blocks last year and all the rebar I needed. 11 laminated veneer lumber beams with a cross-section of 90 by 240 millimeters and a beam length of 7.3 meters. This cross-section of laminated veneer lumber beam with a spacing of 60 centimeters should meet both the load and deflection requirements, as well as the beams themselves. It all cost me 73,000 rubles and my friends helped me unload the truck. I'm very grateful. That includes the beams. I also ordered lumber for the roof. Boards, 200 by 50 for the rafters boards, 150 by 50 for supports, and beams 150 by 150 for the posts under the terrace and the porch. I still need to order 50 by 50 bars for the counter batten and 1-inch boards for the batten. Then I'll have all the lumber I need for the roof. The cost of the boards came out to 11,800. It took us over an hour to unload all of this because there was a nuance. The truck was loaded in the evening when it was +1, but it arrived in the morning when it was -1. And all the boards froze together, so we had to pry them apart with a crowbar and an axe. We stacked the boards inside the house with spacers, put extruded foam at the bottom so they wouldn't soak up water from the puddle, and covered everything on top with packaging from LVLOK. I'll order the rest of the boards soon too, so they have time to dry out a bit. We lifted the beams up right away, and actually 2 people could lift them pretty easily and conveniently. I can't say the exact weight, but the laminated veneer lumber beam weighed somewhere around 100 kilograms. It's better not to get them wet and not to leave them out in the open for too long. The weather isn't letting me continue construction yet because I need to pour the reinforced concrete belt, and for that I need a stable above zero temperature. For now I just put the beams on top altogether and covered them, and I constantly make sure they stay dry. When it comes time to install the roof, if the beams stay uncovered for a week while I'm working on the roof, it's not a big deal. I've already bought the metal roofing tiles for the roof as well, and they were unloaded in my friend's yard with a crane truck. I'm just afraid to leave it at my place, even under a camera. It's better to move it later since it's not far from here. Thanks to Roman, the metal roofing tiles cost 498 rubles per square meter for 0.5 thickness metal. There are options with 0.4, 0.45 and 0.5 thickness metal. The price for them is usually like this now, and for the entire amount with all the necessary strips, all the metal roofing tiles cost me about 80,000 rubles. One detail I didn't know was that I ordered the metal roofing tiles directly from the factory with an exact length of 6.2 meters, and for delivery, special packaging for the metal roofing tiles was required. And, judging by the invoice, it wasn't just regular packaging but reinforced packaging, which I had to pay for. $1,000. But it didn't look like reinforced packaging at all. And even the same laminated veneer lumber beams I received were packaged much better, so that's another detail. You also have to pay for the packaging of metal roofing. Going back to the beam overlap, laminated veneer lumber Bruce isn't everything. The overlap. There should be a ceiling for the first floor, there should be insulation between the beams for soundproofing, and there should at least be a subfloor in the attic. So, 73,000 rubles for the beams and the overlap. The total cost of my floor structure should be about 120,000. Remember, for the prefabricated monolithic one, I calculated about 150,000, and the prefabricated monolithic floor structure is both the load-bearing structure, the rough ceiling, and the floor. This type of floor structure will be better and more comfortable to live with. So, it seems rational not to cut corners, but to add a little more money and make a good floor structure. Who will need a floor structure? Because in your case, it might actually be more rational to make a frequently ribbed precast monolithic floor structure, and it's not difficult to do. On Gleb Grin's YouTube channel, there's a video called CHRP Type Kolkhoz, where the construction technology is described. There's even a manual with all the calculations, and everything is simple and clear for almost everyone. So why didn't I make a CHRP Type Kolkhoz for myself? It's all because of my personal circumstances. In one of the popular videos on my channel about the house for $1 million, I mentioned that most discussions about construction are like theoretical data in a vacuum, which often have nothing to do with real life. And in this real life, it turns out that I hadn't thought through the issue of the floor slab in advance. Accordingly, for the floor slab, I'll have to buy more aerated concrete blocks and rebar and pay for delivery again. When making a floor slab, you need special formwork with screw props, and it's impossible to find that in our village. Plus, even if I do find it somewhere, again, I'll have to bring it here and take it back, and no one will give it to me for free. I'll have to pay to rent the formwork. Since I work alone on the construction site, for a precast monolithic floor slab I'll have to hire a second person because it's impossible to do it without help, and I'll have to pay that person. And that's how 150,000 for materials turns into 200. And 120 and 200 is already a significant difference. There's also the matter of timing, because with the beams they deliver them, unload them, lift them up, and that's it. And I would probably spend a month building a precast monolithic floor, and since I live in a rented apartment, that's an extra month of rent that I'll have to pay. And ideally, this should also be added to the cost of the floor with beams. I would only need to take out and pay 73,000 rubles right now, and the rest I could add sometime later. Because to move into the house, I don't really need the attic, and it can be finished later. The final argument was that in the rented apartment where I live, I'm separated from the neighbors upstairs by a reinforced concrete slab. And still, you can hear everything that's going on up there, especially if the neighbors have kids over. It's just a nightmare. And there won't be a huge difference between a properly made wooden floor and a precast monolithic one. In principle, there will be a difference, but it won't be huge. So, based on these conditions, I made my choice in favor of laminated veneer lumber. That's why I believe you should always consider several options and calculate the costs correctly, taking all the nuances into account, not just the cost of materials. In your case, it might turn out that a composite monolithic floor is the most rational option, or, on the contrary, maybe regular boards will be the best choice for you. Or maybe, in fact, the best option is to build a single-story house. If I were building a house for the second time, I would go for a single-story one. It's just that everyone has different circumstances in life. And this is the best example with playing cards, because yes, there are higher cards, there are better hands. But you have to play with the hand you're dealt. Some people get good cards, some get bad ones. We play with what we're given. Yes, of course, it's easier to play with good cards. But there are people, for example, who can play with a strong hand and still lose. So everything is in your hands and depends entirely on you, and you can win even with bad cards. Just approach construction wisely and you'll succeed. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the continuation of the construction. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and see you next time.